Song of Solomon 3, verse 6. Reference to the second advent. Who is this that cometh out of the wilderness, like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all powders of the merchant? The reference is to Christ coming back, and when Christ comes back, he comes back to the wilderness before he comes to the Mount of Olives. Now, the myrrh, frankincense, the perfumes in verse 6, 3:6, are reference to Jesus Christ in Psalm 45. Psalm 45. You might turn to that. This would be Psalm 45, verse 8. Here are the myrrh and the frankincense and the perfumes, and they're connected with Jesus Christ at the marriage of the Lamb right before the Advent. Psalm 45, verse 8. All thy garments smell of myrrh and aloes and cassia. They are the perfumes. Out of the ivory palaces whereby they have made thee glad. And notice the context of that perfume is verse 6. Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever, quoted in the New Testament, Hebrews 1:8, as referring to Jesus Christ. And notice verse 1, the reference to Jesus Christ. Verse 2, the references to Jesus Christ. And verse 3, gird thy sword upon thy thigh, O most mighty, with thy glory and thy majesty, and thy majesty ride. Where'd you ever read about Christ riding with a sword, except in Revelation 19? It's the second advent. And when he comes back, he's spoken of as an anointed king, verse 1 and verse 7, whose garments smell of perfume, verse 8, like Song of Solomon 3:6. Now, in Song of Solomon 3:6, it says, who is this that cometh out of the wilderness, like pillars of smoke? Well, when the Jews came out of the land of Egypt, they were led by a pillar of smoke. And the pillar of smoke took them down to Mount Sinai, and then took them from Sinai up by the King's Highway on the east side of the Dead Sea, and then crossed the Dead Sea where Jesus was baptized. Joshua went across there into Jordan. So the pillars of smoke that led the Jew begin at Sinai, then come up through Selah, Petra, and Paran, and Mount Seir, and the King's Highway, and then turn this way and go across the Jordan into the land of promise. So when Jesus Christ comes, he'll come at Mount Sinai, and then he'll go up the King's Highway through Selah, Petra, and through Paran and Mount Seir, then cross the Jordan where he was baptized, go through Jericho and Gilgal, and come in the east side of the Mount of Olives to the eastern gate. Now, I'll show you the verses on that, and you might like to write them down and study them, because it may go a little too fast for you here today, but awful lot to cover. Now, these are verses that show that the route of the second coming of Jesus Christ begins at Mount Sinai and ends at the Mount of Olives. I'll read the references to you first, if you'd like to write them down, and then we'll turn to them and read them. All right, the first of these is going to be Zechariah 14. Zechariah 14. The next one is going to be Habakkuk chapter 3. And the next one is going to be Isaiah chapter 63. And the next one is going to be Psalm 89. No, you're going to cross that one out. That isn't right. It's Psalm 68. And the next one is Judges chapter 5. And the next one is Deuteronomy chapter 33. Yeah, 33. Now, those are the references. And you notice how those references cover the Old Testament? They're more about the Old Testament on the second coming of Jesus Christ than there is in the New Testament. And the reason why the Old Testament is a dead and dull book to most of God's people is because they've gotten the idea all the Old Testament has been fulfilled in Jesus Christ, the first coming. Less than 1/4 of the Old Testament has been fulfilled. As a matter of fact, there's only one part of the Old Testament that has been fulfilled. The only part of the Old Testament that's been fulfilled is the part that deals with the coming of a suffering Messiah to make a substitute payment for sin by a blood atonement. That's the only thing that's been fulfilled. And boy, if you think that's all there is in the Old Testament, you never read the Old Testament. That's about 1/50th of the Old Testament. All right, now here they are. First of all, I'm beginning Deuteronomy 33:1. And this is the blessing wherewith Moses, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death. And he said, the Lord came from Sinai. Didn't say the Lord revealed himself at Sinai. The Lord came from Sinai and rose up from Mount Seir. Why, he didn't do that in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, not Mount Seir. Mount Seir is up in Edom's land. He shined forth from Mount Paran. No, he didn't. Not in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy he didn't. He didn't shine forth, but he shined forth in the Mount of Transfiguration in the New Testament. And he's going to shine forth in the tribulation. Arise and let him shine. He's going to shine forth in Revelation 14, Revelation 19. And he shined forth from Mount Paran. The New Bible has changed. And he came with 10,000s of saints. Well, that didn't happen in Exodus. He didn't come with 10,000 saints. He came all by himself. From his right hand went a fiery law for them. Yea, he loved the people. All his saints are in thy hand. Boy, there's something. All his saints are in thy hand. Who's thy? He said, all of God's saints, thy saints are in thy hand. He didn't say, Lord, he didn't say, all God's saints are in God's hand. He said, all God's saints are in thy hand. Who's that? Who's that? It's Jesus. Jesus said, no man is able to pluck them out of my hand. My Father gave me is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. And they sat down at his feet. Every one shall receive of thy words. All right, so the first references here are Sinai, Seir, and Paran. Now that's the tip of the Sinaitic Peninsula, and then it comes northward up through Edom and begins to cross around the Dead Sea on the east side, coming through Arnon, around the land of Moab and the Ammonites. All right, Judges 5, verse 3. Judges 5, verse 3. I'll begin at verse 2. Judges 5, verse 2. Praise ye the Lord for the avenging of Israel, when the people princes. Even I will sing to the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel. Lord, when thou wentest out of Seir, when thou marchest out of the field of Edom. Well, that didn't happen in the battle of Barak and Jael and Sisera in chapter 4. They weren't fighting within 100 miles of Edom and Mount Seir. That battle back there in Judges chapter 4 took place up by Kishon and Megiddo near Jezreel in North Palestine. There's no reference to that in there. All right, 5:4, the Lord, when thou wentest out of Seir, when thou marchest out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled, and the heavens dropped. The clouds also dropped water. What's that a reference to? That's a latter rain. The mountains melted from before the Lord, even that Sinai. Why, Sinai didn't melt when God gave the law back there in Exodus chapter 19 and 20. Even Sinai from before the Lord God of Israel. That didn't all. Look at here. Verse 12. Lead thy captivity captive. Well, that's quoted of Jesus Christ in Ephesians 4:8. That's no reference to Jehovah God at the giving of the law in Exodus. Now, you want to find you in the passage? Here you are. Verse 10. Speak, ye that ride in white asses, ye that sit in judgment, and walk by the way, they that are delivered from the noise of archers, as the old boy in Revelation 6, there, where they're delivered, there shall they rehearse. You're going to have a dress rehearsal when you get to heaven. And that's why it's called a dress rehearsal. Because when you rehearse there for what you can do down here, you get dressed. I mean, fine linens, right to the saints. Present the church without spot, wrinkle, nor blemish. You iron them out. You rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord, even the righteous acts toward the inhabitants of his villages in Israel. Then, here you go, then shall the people of the Lord go down to the gates. down you come. All right, Psalm 68. Yes. Yeah. It means blessed, blessed one. Psalm 68, verse 1. Psalm 68, verse 1, let God arise. There's the Advent. Let God arise. Let his enemies be scattered. There's the Advent. Let them also that hate him flee before him. As smoke is driven away, so drive them away. As wax melts before the fire, so let the wicked perish at the presence of God. It's a Jehovah's Witness text. That text is used to prove it. You melt up in hell, and that's the end of you. But do you notice in verse 1 and 2, there's no reference to hell? That reference is to let God arise and his presence come back to this earth. Folks going to burn up when he comes back, and not going to burn up in hell. They never could get it straight. All right, verse 7. Now watch it. O God, when thou wentest forth before thy people, when thou didst march through the wilderness. See? So the Song of Solomon said, who is this that cometh from the wilderness? O God, when thou wentest forth before the people, when thou didst march through the wilderness, Selah, the earth shook, the heavens dropped, the presence of God. Even Sinai itself was moved to the presence of God, the God of Israel. Here it comes. Thou, O God, didst send a plentiful rain, there it is, whereby thou didst confirm thine inheritance. Why, it can't be the giving of the law at Exodus. Look at here. Look at verse 17. The chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of angels. Why, in referring to the rapture of Elijah that will take place in the tribulation, Elisha said, my father, the chariots of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. There are no reference to the giving of law in Sinai, like you find all these cross-references in these Bibles and all these commentaries. 18, thou hast ascended on high, thou hast led captivity captive. There it comes again, just like he hit it in Judges 5. It's a reference to Jesus Christ. Yes. Gifts for the rebellious also. Receive gifts, that's the Ephesians 4. They got the gifts. They were rebellious. I mean, Simon Peter, he got the gift of tongues and healing. You have nothing more rebellious burden all your life. Yes. Yeah, it is. And I'm just saying that so therefore you know it's Jesus Christ. And if you know it's Jesus Christ, then you know the reference cannot be to the giving of the law. Now, I tell you, I know this kind of dense to y'all, but you see, most of y'all spend your time with television, newspapers and things, your family. You don't spend a whole lot of time with books, and not a whole lot of time with the Bible. Well, most of you spend a lot of time with the Bible, not with other books, thank God. And the thing about it is that you don't realize what's being done with these verses. For example, when I read you Judges 5 and Psalm 68, did you know that all the new Bibles put those in poetic form like poetry so you won't take them literally? Every one of them. And did you know that any commentary you pick up will take every verse I've read so far and place it on the giving of the law at Mount Sinai in Exodus 20 so it can't be fulfilled in the future? And did you know every faculty of every fundamental school in the country would give you the same thing? So that's why I'm so, I know I'm kind of vehement and kind of hard and iron about it, but there's certain things that just stir you up, and folks attacking the Bible just stirs me up. Matter of fact, nothing much else does. Much else does. I think if I was sitting at my desk some night and a bullet came to the window and hit the ceiling behind me from one of my friends, I'd finish the sentence I was typing on before I phoned the police, because that's more important. I wouldn't get the point, you know. But there are certain things that disturb me up. I mean, they upset me, and it's an attack on the Word, and they just attack that Word day and night. They just hate it. All right, Psalm 68, verse 20 or 21. But God shall wound the head. There's the fulfillment of Genesis 3:15. God shall wound the head of his enemies and the hairy scalp of such a one as goes on in his trespasses. Rapture, verse 22. Advent, verse 23. Millennium, verse 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, and 33. So when the Lord comes back, he comes back through the wilderness of Sinai, Seir, and Mount Paran up through Edom. All right, the next reference, Isaiah 63, verse 1. Isaiah 63, verse 1. You notice that the bruising of the head of the serpent did not take place at Calvary. It takes place at the Advent. Isaiah 63, 1. Who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Bozrah? Bozrah is the name, other name of Edom, means a sheep stall, sheepfold, where the lost sheep will be in the tribulation. This that is glorious in his apparel, they're the clothes, they're the garments with frankincense and myrrh. Glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. Who is he? He answers. He says, I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Who's that? Why, Jesus couldn't be anybody else. It couldn't be outer space, like this dumb thump over here said. This Criswell said that outer space travel will be the salvation of the people. No, never. 2, wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine fat? Answer, I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in mine anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment, for the day of vengeance is in mine heart, the year of my redeemed is come. Verse 4, the day of vengeance. That isn't the first coming. Christ didn't come the first time to bring vengeance on people, came to save people. He said, I didn't come to judge the world or condemn the world, but that they might be saved. So there's no reference there to the first coming. Did you ever hear him say that, when he trod the winepress, he was at Calvary when he trod the winepress alone? Well, that makes beautiful preaching, but it's a bald-faced lie. He didn't trod the winepress at Calvary. He shed the blood at Calvary. He's going to step on the grapes when he comes back. What was that lady up in Harriet Beecher Stowe? Did she write the hymn or Uncle Tom's Cabin? Well, who wrote Battle Hymn of the Republic? Was that the same woman? Who was that? What? That sounded like it. Yeah, Julia Ward Howe. Julia Ward Howe and Harriet Beecher Stowe. That's it. And when she wrote that song, she said, mine eyes have seen the coming. Well, now, that's no kind of profession for a Christian. Mine eyes have seen the coming. She didn't see the coming. Of the glory of the Lord? Never, not any chance at all. Not the wildest possibility. John saw him coming in glory. Peter and James saw him coming in glory on the Mount of Transfiguration, but Julia Ward Howe never saw it. Mine eyes have seen the coming of the glory of the Lord. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are. Never. He is tramping out. He hadn't even put a foot in the winepress yet. He hadn't even taken his shoes off yet to get in it. Because when he comes a step on the winepress, he comes in Revelation 14, Revelation 19, and Isaiah 63, and Psalm 68 to stomp on his enemies till the blood comes out to the horses' bridles. The idea of her saying he is stomping out the vintage is stomping, present tense, where the grapes of wrath are stored, quoting from Deuteronomy 32. Why, that poor old Bible muffler, she doesn't know what in the world she's talking about. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. Talking about northerners coming down south and stepping on southerners. I mean, that's the song. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. Really? Oh, really? Well, they had as many Bible believers down south as you did up north. Matter of fact, you read the original accounts by the troops in combat preserved in the writings of Bruce Captain, you find they outnumbered the Yankees about 3-1. Southerners got through the battlefield, you found Bibles all over it. And you couldn't find a deck of cards anywhere on it. You know why you couldn't? Because Southerners, even unsaved Southerners, knew you didn't want to be caught dead with a pack of cards on you. They took them out of the packs before they went in the attack. So he says, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the terrible lightning, fatal lightning of his terrible swift sword. Revelation 19, the sword that goeth out of his mouth. Revelation 19, the sword that goeth out of his mouth. His truth is marching on. How quaint. How unique. His truth is marching on. Any of you folks seen it marching lately? You've been reading your morning newspapers, watch your television, you've seen his truth marching on pretty good, have you? Well, you know what Isaiah said? Isaiah said truth is falling in the street. Jesus said in the last days, because of the iniquity shall abound, because the love of many shall wax cold, and many false prophets shall rise and deceive many. And many shall follow their pernicious ways. That woman was deceived. She's deceived by the devil. She never saw his glory, never saw his coming, and never saw the treading, and knew nothing about the truth. She's probably a Christian when the largest church is up there, professing Christian. What does it say in one of those verses? In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea. Now you know better than that. Now you know better than that. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea. Well, I'll get back in this text in a minute. But did you know that some king or some princes or some princesses or some Caesar, they might have had a little boy that had a bed of lilies to lie in? They say, well, it's no bed of lilies or no bed of roses. And they say, well, this baby might have been born a bed of lilies or a bed of roses with perfume and hangings all around nurse and attendants. But listen, my Savior wasn't born there. He was born in a stable. And his bed was straw, and he was born with barnyard animals. Hence, close the door. Were you raised in a barn? Well, my Savior was raised in a barn. And so she said, in the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea with a glory in his bosom. Why, he was the glory. It wasn't in his bosom. He was the glory of God manifest in the face of Jesus Christ. The Word was made flesh, and John said, we've seen it and we've touched it. It wasn't in his bosom. There wasn't something in Christ that makes you a good person. Jesus Christ is the good person. It isn't something in him. Anyway, with the glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me, as he died to make men holy, he didn't anything of the kind. Paul said, this a faithful saying with of all acceptation, that Jesus Christ came in the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. Let us die to make men free. You couldn't free nobody. If there's anybody in this building can free anybody, just let's see you free anybody. Christ said, he that commits sin is the servant of sin. If the Son shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. Bunch of fellas march around singing that thing like they thought they're singing a Christian hymn. Well, that's the biggest piece of pagan tripe you ever picked up from the Greek school at Athens. In the beauty of the lily, Christ was born across the sea with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free. Well, you can't free anybody. John Knox was a galley slave, and he had the chains on his hand, the chains on his feet, and he was a born-again man. And John Knox, as a galley slave, sitting there at that galley with those chains on him, was a freer man than Frank Sinatra with an income of $2 million a year. The Bible said, he that commits sin is a servant of sin. If the Son shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. You can't free anybody. Well, let's go on. Back at 3. I was going to say this. Have you ever noticed when they start talking about freeing folks or liberating folks? Have you ever noticed all this chaining? Have you ever noticed that? If you're going to liberate Hungary, what do? You take it. If you're going to liberate Cuba, what do? You take it over. If you're going to liberate Mississippi or liberate Alabama, you're going to take them over. You understand that, don't you? Whenever somebody says, now we're going to set you free, boy, we're going to give you equal rights, we're going to give you civil rights, we're going to turn you loose, we're going to give you all the rights, you know what they're going to do? They're going to put a ball and chain on you. They're going to put a ball and chain on you every time. All right, we're working on the root of the advent of Jesus Christ, not on geopolitics. All right, Habakkuk 3, verse 1. A prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, upon Shigionoth. O Lord, I have heard thy speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years make known. In wrath remember mercy. God came from Teman. Teman's the name of one of Esau's boys. He's Duke Teman in Genesis, and he settles in Edom. And the Temanites come from him. God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. Mount Paran is a mountain in Edom. Selah. There's the city. His glory covered the heavens. There's the shine forth. His glory covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. And his brightness, there's shine forth. And his brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of his hand. There was the hiding of his power. Before him went the pestilence, the dabar, the word. And burning coals went forth at his feet. And here he comes, verse 8. Here come the chariots of salvation. And here comes the deep opening up for him to come down, verse 10. And there goes the sun and moon like Joshua conking out, verse 11. And verse 12, thou didst march through the land in indignation. Thou didst thresh the heathen in anger. Thou wentest forth for the salvation of thy people, even for salvation with thine anointed. Thou woundest the head. There's Genesis 3:15. Out of the house of the wicked by discovering the foundation under the neck, and here you come. Walk through the sea with thine horses. Well, that's that body of water that make the solar system look like a puddle. All right, Zechariah chapter 14. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 4, or verse 3, or verse 1. We'll start at 1. Zechariah 14:1. Zechariah 14:1. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem. The Lord says he'll gather all nations, United Nations. The Lord will get them together. I will gather all nations. You know what the Lord told Matthew in Matthew 13? He said, write. Matthew said, what am I going to write? And the Lord said, when you write, you write first to burn them, and then gather my wheat into my barn. So before the wheat goes up in the granary, the good seed, then the tares are going to be gathered together, and they're going to be gathered together to be burned, and they're being gathered right now. You know what that shows you? That shows it isn't long before the wheat goes into the barn. All right, Zechariah 14:1. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, my spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, the houses rifled. That's hence a rifling in a barrel is a drilling out this way. It differs from a gun, and the gun has no rifling. The rifling is the drilling out, the spiral, the barrel. And the houses rifled, we say reamed is the same word, reamed out. Rifled, and the women ravished, that's raped. And half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. They're going to be left in there. Isaiah 6. Then shall the Lord go forth, second advent, and fight. The Lord is a man of war in the book of Exodus. He's a man of war in Revelation 19. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations. One time Jesus was up before Pontius Pilate, and Pontius Pilate was talking to him about his kingdom. And Jesus says to Pontius Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence, not from this world now. But if there's any doubt in your mind as to whether his kingdom's going to be, Zechariah 14:3, then the Lord shall go forth and fight. See that thing? Against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. Have any effect on it. And these verses teach this, that one of these days, pretty soon, half the Christians are caught out at the rapture. The Lord's going to return to this earth, and when he comes back to this earth, He'll come down to the galaxies, solar systems, nebula, star clusters, and when he comes down, he'll come down from the north. When he comes down, he'll come down across the side of the earth to Sinai. He'll come down at Sinai in the air and move across Sinai, and on a map, it'll begin here, and he'll come up from Sinai, up through Edom, up through Seir, up through Paran, up the King's Highway, east side of the Dead Sea, turn at the north end of the Dead Sea, and cross at the place where he was baptized, come across to Gilgal, come across to Jericho, come across the Mount of Olives, land the Mount of Olives, step off that white Arabian steed that travels about 120,000 light years per second, put his foot in the ground, puts his foot in the ground, the mountain splits right in two. Christ said, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall tell this mountain to be removed and cast into the sea, and it shall be done. So puts that foot down, mountain breaks off, then he gets back on that steed and comes down and comes through the eastern gate that's cemented shut, that Kaiser Wilhelm tried to get through and couldn't get through, and Hitler and Rommel were working on when she blew up. And he'll come down through that eastern gate and come into Jerusalem and go in the temple and sit down in the Holy of Holies and put one arm on one cherub and one arm on the other, just like the devil did 3.5 years before. And brother, then it's going to be bow down or else. All right, we'll close there.